Newscast is different to the stuff that we all do in our day jobs, because it's like a proper chat.
Something big's just happened.
And then we're just like, right, gonna do an episode.
We've all tried to get together.
We're just all working something out, and then you sort of have a eureka moment.
What you need to know when you need to know it.
Newscast. Listen every day on BBC Sounds.
Sacked BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised tonight for his conduct, but says he's done nothing illegal. His contract on programmes including The One Show was terminated this week. He's admitted sending inappropriate texts.
This is completely on me. I am 100% in the wrong and I accept full responsibility for that.
The sister of 18-year-old Hannah Lynch, who died with her father in the Sicily yacht sinking, has paid tribute, calling her joyful and amazing. Energy bills are on the up. They'll increase from October after the regulator set a new price cap. We report from Burundi as one of Africa's poorest countries fears it won't be able to cope with the spread of Mpox. And catch of the day, how a cricket fan stole the show in the first test at Old Trafford.
And stay with us here on BBC News for continuing coverage and analysis from our team of correspondents in the UK and around the world.
Hello, good evening. The sacked BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas, whose contract was terminated earlier this week after an investigation into allegations about behaviour in the workplace, has tonight spoken of his shame about inappropriate texts he sent to two women. In an interview with The Sun newspaper released just in the last hour, Jenas said he's apologised to his wife and to the two women involved, though insists he's done nothing illegal. The 41-year-old former footballer was considered by some to be a rising star on The One Show and Match of the Day. Our culture correspondent Charlotte Gallagher is with me. So, as we say, this has only emerged in the last hour. Charlotte, what's he been saying?
Well, he's admitted, Jane, as you said, sending inappropriate messages to two female colleagues on The One Show. He says he feels ashamed and feels like he's let everybody down. And he's described the messages as an error of judgment, but he's stressed that there was nothing illegal and that these messages were between consenting adults. This is a very different Jermaine Jenas from the interview we saw on TalkSport yesterday when he said there were two sides to the story. He was very unhappy. In this interview with The Sun, he's incredibly apologetic.
This is completely on me. I am 100% in the wrong and I accept full responsibility for that. And it's something that obviously I need to address and look at myself. The family situation is the thing is at the forefront of my mind that I'm trying to just piece back together.
As you saw there, he says he's very concerned for his family, his marriage, also his career, and he was very keen to stress in that interview with The Sun that he's not a sex pest.
And just a thought about what this means for the BBC.
I think the BBC will feel really vindicated. He's admitted in that interview that he's 100% in the wrong. He sent those inappropriate messages. In the past, the BBC has been accused of dragging its heels when complaints have been made about presenters. In this case, they acted very quickly. He was sacked within weeks of the allegations being made. Jermaine Jenas has said he's considering suing the BBC over their handling of this crisis. But you have to remember, this is a man fighting for his career and his reputation.
All right, Charlotte, thanks very much. Charlotte Gallagher. The family of the British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and his daughter Hannah have said they are devastated after divers in Sicily found what are believed to be their bodies. Hannah, who was 18, was the last person unaccounted for from the wreckage of the luxury yacht which sank during a storm on Monday. Tonight, her sister Esme described her as amazing, joyful and her best friend. Our correspondent Jessica Parker sent this report from Sicily.
Smiling and happy, Mike Lynch, a man who'd carved out a highly successful career in tech, his arm around his 18-year-old daughter Hannah. In tributes today, he was described as a caring man with a brilliant mind. She as ferociously intelligent, warm and kind. What's believed to be her body was the last to be brought ashore after divers spent days exploring the yacht's wreckage just outside Porticello harbour. The recovery of the final missing person is a sad moment, a sad marker in this tragedy. It also likely means this operation is now moving on to its next stage. The Bayesian is lying on the seabed, 50 metres deep. It went down during a violent storm in the early hours of Monday morning. This 3D model shows the yacht's design. Here you can see the master suite, guest quarters and crew quarters, with rooms connected to the upper deck by a staircase. Why couldn't some escape? Key to investigations will be this man, James Cutfield, the captain.
In Italy, we have the crime of causing a shipwreck, and it will need to be determined whether the captain and crew played a role in this. Additionally, they will investigate whether the crime of manslaughter might apply, particularly if there is evidence of negligent behaviour by the captain or his crew.
Porticello is a quiet fishing town. People here have been left bewildered by what's happened.
Because of this tragedy, everyone in this community is really upset. Although we are Sicilian and those affected are English, we really feel a deep link and sense of affection for these people, as if they were our neighbours.
Guests had been celebrating Mike Lynch's acquittal on fraud charges. Out of 22 passengers and crew, 7 lost their lives. Mike and Hannah Lynch, the Morgan Stanley boss Jonathan Bloomer and his wife Judy, lawyer Chris Morvillo and his wife Nedda, and the boat's chef Ricaldo Thomas. But the youngest victim was Hannah. As her London school flew its flag at half-mast, a tribute from someone who knew her best, her sister Esme, who said Hannah was endlessly caring, supportive and joyful. My little angel, she said, my star. Now tonight, the hub behind me of what was the search and recovery operation is far quieter. It has wrapped up, as questions will increasingly turn as to how a super yacht sank within minutes during what was described by some as a freak weather event. There have been questions about whether access hatches may have been left open, whether the keel designed to stabilise the vessel was fully deployed. We've had few official details and there's been a lot of speculation. And I don't think we'll necessarily get full answers quickly. But in a sign that things are moving forward tonight, we know that the chief prosecutor is due to speak tomorrow. That's the person who will be leading this investigation.
Thanks very much. Jessica Parker there. The typical annual household energy bill will increase by £149 from October after the energy regulator set a new price cap for England, Scotland and Wales. Ofgem says the limit on what suppliers can charge customers is going up because of higher prices in the international energy market. Here's our cost of living correspondent Coletta Smith.
Today's news of an energy bill rise isn't going down well with Chloe.
Everything's just too expensive, and then your rent, like just living, it's just too much. We're just fed up with it, aren't we, really?
Like millions of people who rely on benefits, last winter Chloe and Joshua got extra cost of living payments. But there's no extra help planned this winter.
Where are you going to find the £150? If your wages aren't going up and then benefits aren't going up, you're not getting any extra help with benefits or anything. How are you supposed to pay for it?
Gas unit prices are increasing from 5p to 6p per kilowatt hour, and electricity is going up from 22p to 24p per unit that you use. More providers are now starting to offer fixed tariffs again, which will give you more certainty, but won't necessarily work out cheaper than the standard price cap rate across the year. So make sure you do the maths first. The rise we'll be hit with in the last 3 months of this year is because the price of global gas has fluctuated loads in the last few months. So the amount that your supplier has had to pay for energy has gone up, and they're passing the costs on to us.
We will be doing everything we can, working with the regulator, working with the suppliers to remind them of their responsibilities to the most vulnerable in our society. And this government will leave no stone unturned.
After coming under lots of pressure to scrap daily standing charges, the regulator has also said today that it'll make a final decision on that by the end of the year.
The truth is, though, there is no silver bullet. As a regulator, we can't make costs disappear. We can simply make them move from one part of the bill to the other.
Anybody want a curry and rice, Valerie?
Nothing will change before this rise, though. And this winter will feel tough for millions. The government's removed the £300 winter fuel payment for the vast majority of pensioners, except for those on pension credit.
Last night I had this wrapped over me and down here. Okay. Needed it on last night.
Sylvia and Billy are just above the threshold for that pension credit top-up, so they're losing their winter fuel payment.
Last year was really scary, but we did get the help last year. But we still felt the cold.
It's hard work sometimes when you know, your fingers are freezing, you can't do nothing, can you?
We shouldn't have to do that now when we've worked and paid our taxes all this time, you know, and it's just really frightening.
Despite Billy's Parkinson's, they're determined not to be beaten.
We're going to keep warm, aren't we, Bill?
Coletta Smith, BBC News in Warrington.
Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Helen Catt. Does this announcement today, Helen, put more pressure on the government over that whole issue of winter fuel payments?
Well, yes, this policy has already been criticised because of the potential impact on people in Sylvia and Billy's situation, but also because of a risk that people who actually are still eligible to claim a winter fuel payment will miss out. And that's because there are around 880,000 households that it's thought are able to claim pension credit but don't. So one Labour MP today, Rachel Maskell, has called on ministers to rethink this. She is the only one to have publicly done so far. The Conservatives are trying to force a debate on this in Parliament when it returns in a couple of weeks' time. They're accusing Labour of dishonesty. So what are the chances of a complete U-turn on this? Well, they do seem slim. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has said she made this choice because she said she had a far worse than expected inheritance to deal with from the last government. And what we're hearing from government instead is that they will support vulnerable households. The Energy Consumers Minister has said she is asking energy suppliers into a meeting next week, and she has told them that she expects them to commit to going substantially further to support customers and to stop them falling into debt.
Helen, thank you. Helen Catt there. And just to tell you that Paddy O'Connell will have more on that on Newsnight over on BBC Two shortly.
Jane, you're quite right, because on that energy cap, we will speak to Martin Lewis, the consumer champion. He's going to meet Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. He'll tell us why. And we meet our viewer, Kevin, who's just the wrong side of the threshold for any help. That's Newsnight on BBC Two at 10:30 and on BBC News and the iPlayer.
Paddy O'Connell, thank you very much. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has promised a new way forward for America as she accepted the Democratic nomination to run for the White House. She told supporters in Chicago that America had to move past division and bitterness. This evening, the independent candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., suspended his campaign for the presidency and urged his supporters to back Donald Trump. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, reports from Chicago.
Please welcome the Democratic nominee for president, Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
And welcome to the biggest test of her career. One single speech that could make or break her chances of becoming president. She used the obligatory story of her upbringing to stress that she's from working class roots, not a San Francisco elite. And she said she wants to move America beyond bitterness and division and chart a new way forward.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know
I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me.
Ms. Harris says she wants to build a country in which everyone has the chance to succeed, accusing Donald Trump of being interested only in himself and his rich friends, and claiming that re-electing him would be dangerous for democracy.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
The war on Gaza has been the most controversial issue at this convention, with many Democrats furious about America's support for Israel. But she did not shy away from it.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has just suspended the idiosyncratic campaign he was running as an independent candidate. He is one of those Kennedys, but he's turned his back on the Democratic Party and is now supporting Donald Trump.
In about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me.
We just had a very nice endorsement from RFK Jr., Bobby.
Campaigning in Las Vegas, Donald Trump seems deflated. Low energy, as he might say. And he still hasn't found an effective line of attack on his Democratic opponent.
She's considered to be the worst vice president in history. I don't know who the hell did that. If they do polls and they do studies, she's considered to be the worst vice president in history.
She is the one with the momentum right now, raising over $100 million this week.
Kamala Harris's job tonight was to look and to sound presidential. Of course they loved it here in the arena. This is the Democratic Party faithful. The question is whether she convinced the nation.
And whether this massive enthusiasm will translate into votes. Democrats here may feel as though they're already on course for victory, but polls suggest the race is still extremely close and there's a bruising battle to come.
Robert Kennedy Jr. pulling out of this race may favour Donald Trump slightly. He was recently polling at around about 4%, and there's no guarantee all of his supporters will necessarily switch to Trump. But as we keep saying, this is a very, very close election, and in some states, every vote counts. Now that the party conventions are over, the election now moves into a new phase. The next significant date is the televised debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump next month. And that's another event that really does have the potential to completely upend this remarkable race for the White House.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Smith in Chicago. The World Health Organization has already declared Mpox an international health emergency. And now a new strain of the virus is rapidly spreading across parts of Africa, leading to a surge in infections. The epicenter of the current outbreak is the Democratic Republic of Congo, where more than 16,500 cases have been recorded this year, with 570 deaths. In neighbouring Burundi, one of the continent's poorest nations, there's been a rise in cases, which is worrying medical officials who've confirmed 171 cases this week. Our correspondent, Mercy Juma, has travelled to Bujumbura in the west of the country, where public awareness of the disease is limited and the lack of medical facilities and vaccines means the health authorities are struggling.
At one of the largest medical centres in Burundi's biggest city, staff here are battling to both treat the people coming into this facility and to monitor how far and fast the Mpox virus is spreading.
I had swollen lymph nodes. It was so painful I couldn't sleep. Then the pain subsided up here and it moved to my legs. But I am better now.
They are currently treating 55 cases here. There are 4 suspected cases that just walked in, and their status will be confirmed after a lab result. I'm just outside the men's unit, and normally you wouldn't see these orange or red tapes here. But this is a form of isolating those who are being treated and the rest of the community that may walk in to seek services in this facility.
Burundi is seeing a surge in mpox cases. Medical officials here are concerned about limited resources. There's only one testing laboratory in the whole country, insufficient testing kits and no vaccines. Access to basic resources like water is also limited.
This is a real challenge. The fact that diagnosis is only done in one place, this delays detecting new cases. Health centres are calling the laboratory saying they have suspected cases, but it takes time for teams from the lab to deploy to where the suspected cases are to take samples. And it takes even more time to release the test results.
The epicenter of Africa's current healthcare crisis is neighboring DRC, less than 20 miles from here. What is crucial for health officials here in Burundi is that people understand the dangers of this disease, but that hasn't got through yet, and it will take time.
Public awareness about mpox is quite limited here. Most of those we spoke to do not even know what it is. Those who do are not aware that it is spreading in their country. This lack of awareness means that while on one side of Bujumbura town, efforts are being made to help those affected survive and recover, elsewhere, life carries on as usual. Containment is difficult, making the need for an adequate vaccine even more urgent. Marcy Juma, BBC News, Bujumbura, Burundi.
Here, the funeral has taken place of 7-year-old Elsie Stankham, who was killed in the Southport stabbings last month. She died alongside Alistair Silva Aguiar, who was 9, and 6-year-old BB King. During the service, a tribute written by Elsie's parents was read out, saying she brought light, love and joy to so many lives. And one of her teachers also paid tribute.
Elsie, we have so many special memories of our happy times with you. We will cherish these forever. It's hard to put into words just how much we will all miss you, Elsie Dot. You will always hold such a special place in our hearts.
The funeral of Elsie Stankham. Sentencing continues of some of the people you see here who took part in the recent riots across parts of the UK. Speaking to the BBC, the Attorney General said he didn't think that the long sentences passed so far would cause a backlash. Our UK correspondent Daniel Sanford reports.
The Southport riot was the first of the summer and one of the worst. And in the thick of it was Rory Allington Mott, who circled in this footage shown in court and had travelled all the way from Shropshire. During the course of the fighting, he's seen throwing bricks at officers again and again. He even threw a wheelie bin. More than 50 officers were injured in the riot, and today Allington Mott was given one of the longest sentences so far, 3 years, 3 months in prison. More than 190 people involved in the disorder have now been jailed for an average of 2 years. Many more are being held in prison before their cases are heard. The prison population's risen by more than 700 in a fortnight, so magistrates have been asked to delay other cases until mid-September. In Liverpool, the new Attorney General, the Minister in charge of prosecutions, was visiting the riot-damaged library. Did he think there'd be a backlash from the long sentences?
I don't think there's any possibility of a backlash. I think what most people thought when they saw the scenes unfolding on the streets just outside of here and in other parts of the country, that this was utterly disgraceful, grotesque criminal behaviour, and that those who took part in it deserved to be punished, and the punishments deserved to be severe.
Across England and Wales, officers like these in Bristol are still gathering evidence and pouring through video footage to bring more people to justice. Like Paul Sissons, seen here kicking out at police protecting a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham, and his brother Paul, who attacked a police vehicle carrying dogs. Both were jailed for 3 years. Daniel Sanford, BBC News.
A 67-year-old man has become the first person in the UK to use what doctors hope will be a revolutionary treatment for lung cancer. It's a vaccine that tells the body how to fight and kill the disease. It's based on the same technology as some COVID jabs, as Sharon Barber explains.
Yunus was having difficulty with his breathing in January. He thought it was asthma, but it turned out to be lung cancer.
When they told me this, I asked them, okay, what is the risk for me? You know, what is the probability for survival? They said, if you don't do anything, 4 months left. If you do the treatment, your chance is 35% to survive 5 years.
He's undergone months of chemotherapy and radiotherapy for his lung cancer, which is the leading cause of cancer deaths worldwide. But a new trial is now underway for a vaccine, which it's hoped will improve survival. And Yunus was the first person in the UK to get it. Experts hope the BioNTech vaccine will be a game changer.
I'm very excited. We hope we can kickstart mRNA cancer research for our lung cancer patient. We're going after all stages of lung cancer patient. And hopefully, this first generation will kickstart many other trials coming forward.
So how does it work? The vaccine contains information about several markers found on the lung cancer cells. These should teach the patient's immune system how to find cancer and fight it. And the treatment should specifically target only the cancer cells for destruction. It's a very early stage in the research, with only a small number of people taking part in the trial, and it will be some time before scientists know whether it works and is safe. But for Yunus, being the first to try it means a lot.
I talked to my daughters and they told me that they are proud of me. So I'm proud of myself.
Yunus's hope is that the vaccine will stop his cancer from coming back. Sharon Barber, BBC News.
The Metropolitan Police has ended its investigation into the election betting scandal. Politicians and police officers were placed under investigation earlier this year over whether they'd used insider information to place bets on the date of the general election. But the Met says the high bar proving misconduct in public office hasn't been met. However, the Gambling Commission says it is still looking into potential breaches of the Gambling Act. Special forces in Russia have killed 4 inmates who'd taken staff hostage at a penal colony in Russia's Volgograd region. The attackers, identifying themselves as Islamic State militants, killed 2 members of staff and injured 5 more before posting mobile phone footage of the attack. The siege ended when snipers shot all 4 of them at the prison. There has been flooding, power cuts and travel disruption in parts of the UK because of Storm Lillian. Strong winds of up to 80 miles an hour have hit Wales and northern England, causing train cancellations and leaving thousands of homes without power. Here's Fiona Trott.
A festival fiasco. And what's happened to the owners of this tent? Left high, but not dry. Campers at the Leeds Music Festival waved goodbye to their beds and some of the acts after 3 stages were forced to close. On the other side of the Pennines, Bolton's Food and Drink Festival was barriered off.
What's happened here?
Both bank holiday business and community life brought to a standstill.
Absolutely devastated. I'm not going to lie, I'm devastated. I've cried, I've not stopped crying.
The gazebo's come straight through, shattered the tables, so I don't really know how much damage there is yet.
Damage from trees cut electricity supplies to thousands of homes. Northern Power Grid said more than 60,000 customers were affected in the east. Electricity Northwest said around 18,000 houses were hit there.
6:10 this morning, there was a horrendous noise, so I looked out the window and just in time to see the first part of this tree fall across the road.
Trains were stopped in their tracks across the northwest. Debris and floods affected 35 different sites. There was disruption on TransPennine and LNER services too. And look at this. Nervous drivers on the Humber Bridge this morning. It later closed to high-sided vehicles. Having left its trail of destruction, Storm Lillian has now reached Scandinavia. An early bank holiday visitor we were happy to send packing. Fiona Trott, BBC News.
Now to cricket, and in the first test at Old Trafford, Sri Lanka finished the day 82 runs ahead but 6 wickets down in their second innings. Earlier, a first test century for Jamie Smith was the highlight of England's first innings, and today's play also saw some memorable fielding. Not all of it actually on the field of play, as Joe Wilson explains.
It felt like one of those days on tour for Sri Lanka. First, they watched Jamie Smith bat. In just his fourth Test match, Smith made his first 100 for England. No one expects it to be his last. Then Mark Wood had fun, and more to the point, as we follow the ball, so did the crowd. The catch here merits some close attention. One-handed, not for show but for a practical purpose. There was a drink to hold and protect in the other hand. Very difficult to coach such technique, as England staff acknowledged. Minimal spills, full respect, and England led. Yeah, Sri Lanka began their second innings 122 runs behind, and they were soon in trouble. 0 for 1 trouble, 1 for 2 trouble.
Oh, there's the edge.
Quick wickets were welcome news, in particular for England's captain. Ollie Pope was leading on the field, while the injured Ben Stokes retains a strong influence. In fact, at times, it seemed like he was everywhere. Sri Lanka's skipper was out LBW with his side still trailing. But there's normally light in a test match if you really seek it, and Sri Lanka then steadily batted towards it. A significant partnership built between Angelo Matthews and Kamindu Mendis, shifting the mood. Sri Lanka closed 82 ahead but 6 wickets down. Matthews fell to a catch even the crowd might have been proud of. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Old Trafford.
This programme continues on BBC One.
Tonight, Labour's growing headache over pensioners. Now, Martin Lewis is to meet Rachel Reeves. He tells us why. And President Putin's next steps rated by one man who dared to confront him. Hello. The consumer champion Martin Lewis is to meet the Chancellor Rachel Reeves over poorer pensioners. When it comes to the cost of living crisis, this is the political equivalent for Labour of release the Kraken. He tells us tonight millions of poorer pensioners need extra help. To discuss are Stephen Bush of the Financial Times and broadcaster Inaya Falarin Iman. Hello to you both. Thank you for coming. The energy price cap, as you'll know by now, is going up by 10 pence in the pound. Bills will still be lower than last year, but universal winter weather payments are being withdrawn. Millions will be worse off as a result, including poorer pensioners, and this is not a good look for the new government, so says Martin Lewis. He pursued the Conservatives over the cost of living crisis. He has millions of supporters who want him to be Chancellor. He told me why he'll be meeting the real one, Rachel Reeves, and what ideas he has to boost who's eligible for help.
I think where we are right now, with the energy price cap going up 10%, which really is diminishing all the benefits, most of the benefits that we have had from the prices coming down, it's looking a very hard winter for pensioners. This is a bad look for the new government, and I hope it will soften this in the budget. Whether it does the council tax system or another system, I don't care. It needs to broaden the eligibility criteria somewhat.
What's going to be the effect on people who are drawing a pension?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers, pretty much every pensioner will be shelling out more for energy this year net than they did last year. So while the energy price cap is going up 10%, this winter, the rate you pay for energy will still be cheaper than last winter because the energy price cap has already gone down. But if we look at what we would expect a typical home to pay over the 6-month period between October and March, they will pay roughly £100 less than last winter. And last winter, remember, was deemed an energy crisis winter. But last winter, all pensioner households got up to £300 cost of living support. That's gone already. So already they're £300 down on the support this year compared to last year. And the gain from lower rates is only £100. And then we look at the government's winter fuel payments. Now, what it has done, as is well known, is it's changed it from a universal payment to a payment that is means tested. Effectively, you have to be getting pension credit. Now, pension credit is for the very poorest pensioners. In most cases, it's pensioners who earn less than £11,300 a year, which is right at the very bottom end. And even then, there are 880,000 who don't claim it. So what we've done is gone from the mass to a very limited number of people. So most pensioners are going to be around 600 down on support, 100 gain back from costs. So roughly back of an envelope, £500 down. Even those who get winter fuel payment are still going to be a couple of £100 down when you look at the totality of energy costs over the winter.
I remember you snipping at the heels of the last Conservative administration. Is there something that you want done here? And are you going to be snipping at the heels of the new Labour administration?
Look, I'm apolitical. I look at individual issues and I talk about them. I snip at them if you like, and I will snip at all governments when they're doing things that I don't think are right. And when it comes to the winter fuel payments, while I absolutely understand the argument for getting rid of universality, and indeed multimillionaires do not need the winter fuel payment, my problem is we've gone from everybody to far too narrow a group. The eligibility criteria is far too narrow. People earning less than £11,300 is the very poorest. And those just above that threshold, those are the ones who will really be hurting. Now, when we were doing energy support systems in May 2022, it was when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor, a mechanism that was used then was using council tax as a proxy for household income. That's the problem with this. Because it's a household payment and we don't have the data on household income, that's why everyone says you have to go from the main to just this small group. My answer would be, well, we used council tax as a proxy before. Then it was band A to D council tax. It could be band A to C. So what you could do to widen eligibility, this is an imperfect, I accept, but workable solution, is you say everybody on pension credit, every pensioner on pension credit gets winter fuel payment, and every pensioner in a council tax properties A to D also gets the winter fuel payment. Then you increase the eligibility to more who are hurting. And what I'd also do, as I said to Rishi Sunak at the time and he put in place, and I'm meeting Rachel Reeves in a couple of weeks, and I'll be saying the same to her, is then I'd give local councils a small slush fund for the discretionary cases of people who miss out and who should get it. I say my solution is imperfect, but it's workable and it is quick.
Martin Lewis talking to me. Apparently, I was in a cupboard, but it was nice to hear from him. Inaya Folarin Iman is the broadcaster and panellist on Radio 4's Moral Maze. She stood for the Brexit Party in 2019. Stephen Bush is associate editor at the Financial Times, and you did not stand for the Brexit Party in 2019. Inaya, to Martin's point, we don't need to give the money to Paul McCartney and to multi-millionaire pensioners. So Rachel Reeves is not wrong to open this issue up of perhaps too much money going to too many people.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, she has billed herself in the election campaign as being fiscally conservative, seemingly even more fiscally thinking about, paying people and subsidies than even Liz Truss when she had the energy price guarantee. But the reality is they're in a difficult position now because, as we see now, we have this energy price cap increasing, and that's going to mean much more money for people that they're going to have to pay. And Labour don't want to be the party that are not caring about the people at the bottom of society, and people are struggling during this cost of living crisis. So they're going to be in a very difficult position.
Yes, I mean, and I said release the Kraken. Rachel Reeves, you don't really want Martin Lewis banging on your door and going on Newsnight about it, do you? I mean, how much of a headache is it? Naya's saying this is a headache. How much is it?
It is a real headache. Yes, as it happens, today is the 50th day in office. Keir Starmer can no longer be our shortest-running Prime Minister of the 21st century.
Oh, has he beaten Liz Truss?
He's beaten Liz Truss. So while they can get quite a lot of credit by saying, look, we inherited a mess, and there's a lot of truth in that, nonetheless, for all of the reasons he was setting out, because pension credit is for the poorest pensioners, yes, visibly, do we need to be giving Paul McCartney a winter fuel allowance? No. Do we need to be giving the average pensioner a winter fuel allowance? No. Is the correct place to draw the line pension credit? Probably not. And then, there will be lots of stories. There was a very moving story on the 10 o'clock news today about people who are just above that threshold. So it's going to be very difficult, very painful for those pensioners, and politically very painful for the government.
But picture an average family watching Newsnight. Perfect family entertainment on a Friday night.
Indeed.
The 25-year-old says, I don't get anything. I haven't got any money. Rents are astronomical. Is there a generation calculation going on here?
Well, I think that, I would worry about that kind of zero-sum game. And actually, if you look at a lot of the polling across many generations, many people don't think that older people are just fat cats that have big houses and lots of money. We had lots of conversations years ago about people choosing between heating and eating. And especially for this time, for the Labour government, we've seen inflation-busting pay rises for the public sector. Now, that's not necessarily saying that that was bad, but the optics of it and the narrative that, for example, maybe their union paymasters were benefiting from this Labour government.
Have you been reading our inbox? Because that's exactly the point our viewer wrote to us about. He's called Kevin Newton, and he got in touch with us about the winter fuel payments. I spoke to him earlier. I started by asking whether he'd written to his MP as well.
I've written over 60 emails to my local MP, Pat McFadden, and he hasn't even had the decency to return one email to me.
You see, I've got probably younger viewers who never get any help with it in their flat share. Is it you're angry because you've worked all your life, or do you think everyone's suffering?
Everyone that's just above the threshold is going to suffer. It's also, can I say, that it may have a drastic effect on the already stretched NHS, where people are going to choose to switch off their eating and whatever, and it could affect them going into hospital with hypothermia or whatever.
What will it mean for you? Will you make a choice between heating all the rooms in your house and heating just one?
It'll be heating probably just one room in the house.
So what kind of a choice has the Chancellor got to make? She's got a lot of striking trade unionists. She wants to do a deal, and she wants to help the poorest pensioners, not all of them. That's a political calculation, Kevin.
Well, that could be a political calculation, but I thought Labour was to reach equal opportunities for everybody. And at the moment, she's signalling out the people that can't go on strike or whatever. Well, she thinks that she's hit the least people that are going to affect her. But I've always said the pen is mightier than the sword, and we will put our X in the appropriate box on when we come to vote.
Kevin, you're a Newsnight viewer. How are you getting on with the new format of it?
Very, very good. Most enjoyable.
Well, thank you for writing to us, putting your trust in us, and for showing us into your home and your Walsall FC shirt and putting your faith in us. Thank you very much, Kevin.
OK, thank you.
Thank you. With thanks to Kevin. He's written to Pat McFadden 60 times.
Well, I mean, MPs often, MPs do take it seriously when people write to them, particularly, it must be said, when they're letters they don't usually receive. That's always what really spooks MPs, because that's when they know then there's a proper groundswell. But look, this is going to be a major point in the life of the Labour government. It'll be the first serious rebellion, obviously not enough to be defeated, but there will be MPs in marginal seats who feel that they need to rebel precisely because of the letters they'll be getting. I think the advantage they have is because they've started on a very, very narrow eligibility, you can see how they could move to something like what Martin Lewis is suggesting, still bank most of those savings, so still be able to close that £22 billion.
Wiggle room, we call that, wiggle room. So also, to you and I, we bid for the Labour government, that they weren't available. Ed Miliband was out today saying, actually, we're going to reboot our energy supplies, so in the end, we'll bring down the nation's bill as a new Labour government. But in politics, timing is everything, isn't it? And they can't invent a new nuclear power station.
Well, this is the thing as well in terms of the timing point as well, because we're also still waiting for all of these tax rises that we're expecting to be announced in the autumn. So this is one of the first things that they've announced, and it looks like it's hitting a lot of vulnerable people. But in terms of the specific point about energy, well, we'll have to wait and see. The reality is, when it comes to this GB energy policy, whilst it sounds very popular in the polls and amongst the public, we still don't know a lot of what this really looks like. And if we go by the way that the last government acted when it came to energy, there was a lot of short-term decision-making. There was a moratorium on fracking.
You couldn't put a wind turbine on the land.
Exactly.
People got very grumpy. So they've got they can blame the Tories, but they love blaming the Tories, so they can blame them a bit. But it is Rachel Reeves's name on the withdrawal of the Universal. That's going to be hers. So let me ask you, tell me about the calculations. This is your life, Stephen. We're getting an insight into how Labour are thinking. What are the trade-offs here that they're making? Most pensioners, half pensioners, voted Tory anyway.
Well, so one of the tensions is if you inherit a situation where you know that you're going to have to raise some taxes just to stay still on public services. You know that people expect you to put more money in the NHS, otherwise you're not going to get re-elected. And you know that there are various things that people in the Labour Party want. So you sit there and go, OK, who doesn't vote for me? You think that makes sense as a place to tighten the purse strings a bit. But of course, the important thing is that vote was quite divided at the last election between Reform and the Conservatives. If those people all get annoyed enough that they start to vote tactically against Labour, that's more painful.
And back to where I started, when this was introduced, pensioners were poorer because the Conservatives, the lovely David Cameron and George Osborne, they put the triple lock in. So pensioners got richer.
Well, there is that argument there, and the reality is that we have an ageing population and a shrinking workforce. A smaller proportion of the working age population is paying for a larger proportion of older people and other people claiming welfare, and difficult decisions will undoubtedly have to be made.
Is there any decision in public life at the moment that's not difficult? I mean, every decision has the word difficult put in front of it, Stephen. That's our new life, isn't it?
Well, I think when you've been a rich old democracy for a very long time, you've made all of the easy decisions, right? If there were easy decisions available to Rachel Reeves, not just Jeremy Hunt would have made them, Gordon Brown would have made them, Dennis Healey would have made them, the Chancellor in 1945 would have made them.
Like
so they are all difficult.
And it's like protecting hard-working people. We should be taxing lazy people, and we should be making the easy decisions, but no one's going to vote for me. Finally, just to you both, in a couple of sentences, do we tell Newsnight viewers, wiggle room, that actually expect, in October at the budget, expect some movement on what appears to be a red line? Well,
we're going to have to hope so. And I think, as Stephen alluded to, that there is still space for them to actually not go as hard as they wanted to, for example, for this particular change. So that may well be the case.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very tight and very tough budget.
OK. You sound like Yoda, But nonetheless, that's why you're here. That's why you're on the panel. Now, I must tell you that the team is reporting breaking news as we've been on air this evening. It's been reported in about the last 30 minutes that a number of people are reported to have been killed in a knife attack in the western German city of Solingen, local media say, and we'll bring you more if we get it before the end of the programme. Now, Vladimir Putin has promised punishment for Ukraine's incursion into Kursk. Kyiv now controls an area within Russia around the size of New York City. Thousands of families have left their homes, and TV pictures from Ukraine show captured Russian troops. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, whose regime buys oil from Moscow, was in Ukraine today and urged peace talks. As Ukraine prepares for Independence Day tomorrow, the US Embassy in Kyiv warns that there's a risk of escalation in attacks. Our guest tonight describes himself as Vladimir Putin's enemy number one. Bill Browder once advised on millions of pounds worth of donations of business work, within Russia. And when his associate was killed, he campaigned successfully for laws in the EU and the USA to go after Russian kleptocrats, their assets and their freedoms. His own life is a history story. American-born, he's descended from a famous US communist leader and has recently been knighted in the UK. William, Sir Bill, welcome.
Great to be here.
What kind of a moment is this perilous 24 hours? Independence Day tomorrow, Putin humiliated, promising punishment.
Well, for the last, basically since this war started, everybody has underestimated the Ukrainians. They said this was going to be a 3-day war, Putin was going to roll in, everyone was going to drop their weapons. We're now 2.5 years into this war. And then everyone said, well, the Ukrainians, they have to just fight back when the Russians are attacking them on their territory. And without telling anybody, they launched this unbelievable, and I would say very successful invasion of Russia. And it completely has turned the tables, because now we have a situation where Putin has to make terrible decisions. Does he move troops from the invasion of Ukraine to protect Russia? And if he doesn't, then he ends up with Ukrainians pushing on more territory.
He obviously he's being wrong-footed, but he's promised he's going to get back on his right foot, President Putin. Do you think the next 24 hours is likely to see the risk of escalation?
Well, I mean, every day there's risk of Putin doing terrible stuff, and he does terrible stuff whether the Ukrainians go into Russian territory or not. There was a children's hospital that was bombed, many dead children. There's atrocities across the board. I don't think that, yes, for sure, Putin will try to do something unthinkable, unspeakable, because he always does that. But it doesn't mean necessarily that just because the Ukrainians have done this, that the probabilities are any higher. He's always done that. That's been his modus operandi.
You decided to seek revenge, really. And after your associate died, Sergei, you went after kleptocrats and cronies. Did you learn something about the way Putin came after you that is a read across to how he might act in this act of humiliation by Zelensky?
Well, what I've seen Putin do consistently over more than a decade since I've been fighting with him is that he never backs down. He always escalates. And he's not worried about making mistakes. He makes terrible mistakes all along the way. He doesn't suffer any embarrassment when he makes those mistakes. He did stupid things when I was fighting with him. He's doing stupid things now. He will escalate, there's no question. But the one thing I can also say is that if you don't fight back, he's not going to back down. I mean, so the only way to get him in any type of position where there's a possible good outcome is to put the boot on the throat so that he feels as much pain as the Ukrainians are feeling.
Is it possible that it puts cracks in his circle?
Definitely, definitely. If you remember a year ago, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, started marching towards Moscow. And it was totally humiliating for Putin. And it took him 2 months to figure out how to kill Prigozhin. And during that 2 months, it was a total embarrassment and humiliation for Putin. The same thing is happening right now, that the Ukrainians can launch an invasion, come into Russia, and take over territory that the Russians can't defend. That's a total humiliation. And for a strong man, humiliation is the worst thing that can happen.
I know, and Nishi, a lot of us don't like hearing about the worst thing happening with a new war in Europe. This is the famous site of one of the iconic tank battles of the 20th century in Kursk. It's likely that British Challenger tanks have been rolling across the Russian border. Many viewers would quite like to know who's out there trying to stop this war.
Well, I mean, the only people that can stop this war are the Ukrainians. Russia invaded Ukraine. It's not Putin has not been willing to withdraw from Ukraine. And so the only way that we can stop this is if the Ukrainians can fight back. And I would argue that there's been so much pressure put on the Ukrainians to effectively tie one hand behind their back and not fight back. as hard as they could.
Bill, I want to ask you finally, I read an interview with you recently. I've seen you give a speech recently, which many of us were listening to on your every word, because you are at risk. And you said in a newspaper interview recently, you feel like enemy number one.
Well, Zelensky is probably enemy number one. Navalny was enemy number one until he was killed, but I'm definitely on the top of their list, certainly among foreigners. Putin doesn't like people who stand up to him. He doesn't like people who create consequences for him. I'm one of those people, and I will continue to be one of those people, because Vladimir Putin is one of the most dangerous men in the world, and he's causing terrible pain for everybody out there, and he needs to be stopped.
Thank you very much for coming. I can't believe that your granddad was a communist in the United States. You've been knighted in the UK. Putin's got you on his bad list. You need your own programme, Bill. Thank you for coming. Stephen and Inaya, what do you make of this British involvement? Is it a political fault line? Because the new Defence Secretary says we should be proud that British equipment's being used in the defence of Ukraine. Stephen first.
No, the United Kingdom is quite rare in Europe, as there is not a significant pro-Putin force in either the main party of the centre-right or the main party of the centre-left. It was, of course, an issue in the election, and Nigel Farage slightly diverged from that. But one of the reasons why this is such a significant moment, this successful invasion of Kursk, is it does change the mood music around Ukraine's defence of their freedoms, and it will, put a rocket booster under anyone who says, look, they can't win, give it up. So it's a huge victory for them. But here in the UK, political consensus.
And the visit of the Prime Minister of India today, he was saying, look, I'll be a broker for you. I'll help get peace. But he didn't mention in the press conference that he buys Russian oil. So where is this going? We're worried about the next 24 hours. But where do you think it's going?
Well, I think it's very good to see that Britain has continued to support Ukraine. I think there is cross-party consensus on this issue, and it has very broad public support. I mean, in terms of where this is going, a lot of it is also going to be somewhat dependent on what's going to happen in the autumn in terms of the US election. If you look at some of the people around Trump's campaign, many of them are very sceptical or critical of Ukraine. Even his VP Vance has made various different comments. They often see what's happening in Asia with Taiwan and China as their biggest concern. And so even when Trump was obviously president, he pushed for Europe to spend much more on defence when it came to NATO. And hopefully there is a wake-up call in Europe that they will have to take a greater role if they can no longer depend in the same way that they have done on the US.
Stephen, does it look to you like President Putin's waiting for Trump?
Yeah, look, this is the thing that everyone who knows the conflict has been saying. That, look, he knows that the biggest victory he can have is for Donald Trump to come back into the White House, because of, exactly as Anaya said, the fact that people around him have been very sceptical of Ukraine, very sceptical of the value of defending it. And so he does know that if he can keep this war going until then things could change. So Ukraine's won a big victory on the battlefield, but now they need to win a victory in the United States presidential election.
So it's an extraordinary moment. We're looking ahead for the Independence Day tomorrow. It could be a trigger for both sides to show new strength. And of course, here we've had thousands of refugees who came to live here. Millions of people crossed across Europe. And Britain does seem to have taken a leading role in supplying defence equipment, almost a triangulation with the EU, which we left, which of course you campaigned for. Is this something that proves to you why you were right about Brexit and all those Remainers were wrong?
Well, look, I think it's been a very good thing that Britain has taken a leading role. And I think, we talked about energy earlier on in the show. And I think it was very worrying when the invasion happened toward Ukraine by Russia, that Europe for so long has been dependent so much on energy imports and so on and so forth from the Russian regime. And actually, hopefully, this will be a wake-up call that energy security, plentiful energy, reliable, cheap, is a priority across Europe. And Britain can too take a leading role in that.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to ask you perhaps to comment on some of our headlines, which I've got here now. But for now, thank you both very much indeed. Let's take a quick look at a few of the stories on the front pages. Guess what's on the front of the Daily Mail? Pensioners' £500 energy bill hike after Labour cuts. Millions of pensioners will have to find an extra £500 to heat their homes, piling pressure on Labour to reverse the axing of winter fuel payments. And that much we heard, I think, that figure from Martin. The Guardian. Fears of cruel winter if welfare fund help ends. Campaigners and MPs say efforts to cut public spending deficit could push people into poverty. Let's just break from the papers. This is just The Guardian and the Mail.
Yeah, traditionally the alliance, when you see both of those papers saying the same thing, you know that the government's in for a very difficult time. That's the alliance which stopped Tony Blair getting through ID cards. Look, this is going to be, as I said, a very difficult moment for the Labour Party. They've been having lots of meetings between Treasury ministers and members of the Parliamentary Labour Party. I think there will be something, whether it's something on home insulation or something about where the support comes in. But again, it does all depend on what is going to be a very, very tight budget, because they are going to have to find. There's a very big hole that they need to fill. There are very big demands on our public services, and they are going to have to make those sums add up. Let's go to the Times. Because you won't be surprised to know. Let's switch to the Times. Look, Reeves feels the heat over winter fuel benefit cuts. And look, there's Emily Maitlis, Prince Andrew and Me, the inside story. That's a link to Newsnight, if ever there was. What really happens on hen nights in 2024? That's another story to get going there with. Here we are, the Daily Telegraph. Minister Putin grip on Russia is shaken. This is what we were hearing from William. The Kursk incursion has sown doubt among Russians, the Defence Secretary tells the Telegraph. And also we go to the Mirror now. Not a leg to stand on. I'm reading directly from the paper here. This isn't our reporting. BBC staff horrified by sacked Match of the Day stars text, which crossed a line. And we go to the Sun. They've got an exclusive, they say. Sorry to my wife and women I texted. It wasn't physical, but it was cheating. I'm self-destructive. I let my family down. I'm so ashamed. Inaya, these people in public life getting into trouble, it seems to be endless.
Yes, I mean, that was one of the things I think that, painted a very negative picture amongst many other things with the last government, that there were a number of scandals related to improper behaviour in all sorts of ways. There's of course been conversations at the BBC about some of the things that have been reported over the last few months and so on and so forth. I think it does sow a level of distrust with the public and a sense that the people that we hold in high esteem are not behaving properly. But at the same time, we have to understand the details of what went on.
We do. I mean, inevitably, it seems that the dial has shifted at the BBC. They've sacked him straight away. There's no shilly-shallying like there was in the case of Hugh Edwards, where he was employed and received a pay rise, which infuriates many people who watched Newsnight.
Well, look, the important difference is ultimately employers can't and shouldn't sack people until they're proven guilty one way or the other. Now, obviously, this is much less serious.
That's to protect all of our rights.
Yeah, exactly, right? Whereas ultimately, as Jermaine Genius himself said, he did send those texts. So it's actually, it's a much easier thing for any employer, including the BBC, to do. They're, of course, right to have done it. But I would say, to defend the BBC's handling of that other story, that it is very difficult when you have a live court case. You can't have a situation where people are sacked just because there's a court case. That, justice does have to play out, and then there has to be.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's just come so soon on the heels of another scandal. The corporation's behaviour always under scrutiny. Thank you both very much. We're going to switch with the final word about Storm Lillian. It has brought disruption, flooding and power cuts. Strong winds and up to 70 miles per hour, in fact, have hit northern England and Wales, causing trains to be cancelled, cutting electricity to thousands of homes. And these festival goers in Leeds and on social media saw their tents lift off. Now look at this. It's quite remarkable, this one. I think it looks like it's on approach to Heathrow. I mean, that's my experience of camping wherever I go, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm not a happy camper. I like a nice warm hotel and all of my creature comforts myself.
Inaya, how are you coping with this tent?
I'm not sure I'd cope with that very well. I mean, it is seemingly typical British weather, so you, I guess, have to expect it somewhat. But I think that would be quite disappointing indeed for many of those people.
That's very quite disappointing indeed. You heard it summarised there. Thank you very much for coming and have a great weekend. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the bank holiday weekend yourself. Victoria will be back on Tuesday. Do join her then. Look at this, thunder and lightning. Good night.
Live from London, this is BBC News. An attack at a festival in Western Germany. Police say several people have been killed and others injured. Energy bills on the rise. They'll increase from October after the regulator set a new price cap. Sacked BBC presenter Jermaine Jenas has apologised tonight for his conduct but insists he's done nothing illegal.
This is completely on me. I am 100% in the wrong and I accept full responsibility for that.
Trial of a promising new lung cancer vaccine that uses mRNA technology to tell the body how to fight and kill the disease begins in the UK. Hello and welcome, I'm Samantha Simmonds. We start with some breaking news from Germany, where police say a number of people have been killed and others injured in a suspected knife attack in the western city of